So what JavaFX Basics or JavaFX does is give you the GUI environment to write codes and display your code in a GUI environment. Previously, Java used to have another component. We used to call it the swing component, which we do not use anymore. It was a little more cumbersome, and now they have come up with, I think this is about a 3-4 year, they have come out with the JavaFX, which is a platform that lets you create GUI interactive elements within your program in a much simpler, easier way. So we are going to get into that, and in this JavaFX, the code that you're going to be seeing would actually take or would use or implement some of the things that you have already learned. Things like inheritance, extending from a parent to a child, objects. Again, you're going to be seeing the use of objects or implementation of objects here very, very heavily. Very heavy on methods that are already written. So these are library methods that are already written. You will see a lot of overriding. So anything with those objects concepts like polymorphism, inheritance, object-oriented application is going to be heavily used over here. I also want to warn you that sometimes some of the methods that you're going to be seeing are going to be long methods because these are how they have been named. So sometimes they would be using object name dot another method name, and it's going to pass some arguments. So sometimes you would see some of the codes that are pretty long in nature, but as long as you understand how it is working with the class and the object and the method, you should be fine. And in also here, you'll see a lot of the import statements that we will bring, because again, we are trying to bring in classes and methods and use those things in your program. So I'll point those things out to you as we go along. So this is our new framework. That is what I was referring to a little earlier, to allow for writing our GUI, graphical user interface program. So it would present some of the basic programming, and then it will show some of the OOP applications. Quite a few of these things that we are going to be seeing. So as you can see over here, we're going to use a lot of these common properties. We'll be using this color class, font class, image class. So again, remember those classes that you created with the getters and the setters there? That's what we are going to be using, but you're not writing it anymore. You're just going to be bringing those things in and using the individual methods by calling the right method, passing the right kind of parameter, and it will do the job for you. So those are the things that we'll be using. We have our images, the image class. We would look into the layout nodes. So basically the way the setup is going to be done, again, this is a GUI interface. So we'll talk about our scenes and our stages and our layouts and the different forms of layout, how we can bring in individual objects like a button, like a checkbox, and add some interactivity to it. Those are the kind of things that we're going to be looking at. To display text, we're going to use text class. You can add fonts to it. You can add color to it. So a lot of these things that are going to be used here, these are all the GUI components that we'll be seeing being used in this chapter. I already talked about this a little bit. Swing and AWT used to be the prior GUI platform, but we kind of moved away from it. We do not use them anymore. So this is very important. Make sure that we understand this thing very clearly. So whenever you see a frame or whenever you see something laid out on your screen, we are talking about three things. We are talking about a stage, okay, that's your background, and then you bring in a scene, okay, and on your scene you probably lay out or use some kind of a layout, which is basically a positioning element. So when you see that button being placed on the screen or the scene over here, it is actually on a layout. So layout allows you to position the scene and position the elements in this scene that you are trying to create. So we would be talking about stage, scene, and button. So scene is the one that is going to hold that layout, and the layout would have the individual GUI components like the buttons or the checkboxes or whatever you would like to put in there. Okay, so let's take a look at a program. So first thing is, you are going to be seeing that you would have an application, and that application, it would be the parent class. So you would have a application, and as soon as you create that application, it's going to create a class which is going to extend from an activity class. And again, extending is, now we are going to the parent class and grabbing some of the properties from there. And you're also going to be seeing within the program, you're also going to be seeing a lot of the overriding methods. Remember your overrides? So basically the same method names, but you want to override them because it has a different signature. And then you have your stage, scene, nodes. Nodes are sometimes the components that they're referring to there. So those are the kind of things that you'll be seeing. So let's take a look at a program. Remember what I said earlier? Look at the imports that we have. Okay, quite a few imports. So you have your application. So this is where you'd see most of the time it would extend from application. So that's your main parent class that you're extending from, and then you're bringing in your scene, your control, and your stage. Okay, so these are the imports that I need for a simple program like this. Okay, so let's take a look. Again, going back to the original concept, remember everything starts from your main. Okay, so when you try to run this program, it's going to come in and look for this main method, and in your main method you pass in a string argument, and the main method calls the method called launch. Okay, and passes this argument that you pass in this launch. The launch would then call for the start method that you had defined earlier. So here, every time, and you would see this part pretty much for all your programs. So whatever you write in your program, you would eventually come in, create your main method, and call your launch, and this launch is going to start all this that you see up here. Okay, so let's take a look at the code. Public class my JavaFX. So that's the name of my class, which extends application. So what's my parent class here? Application would be my parent class. My JavaFX is the current class. Okay, so it is extending from application. Then I have this method called start. Okay, this method does not return anything. How do you know? Because it is void, but it is a public method. It passes a parameter, right? And what kind of parameter does it pass? It passes actually a class. Now stage. Okay, so now we are getting into a class or an object that we are trying to pass over here. So I say I'm going to pass in this stage when I call this start method. Okay, so just like your regular primary variable, remember int a or double number, same thing. So this is my stage. So I'm going to pass in an object called stage, and I just came up with a name called primary stage, or a variable name for that stage that I'm trying to pass. Okay, it's good? All right. The next thing I do is I also create an element here called button. Now, yes, Travis. By calling in extend, as soon as you say public class myJavaFX extends application, everything that I have in application is available to my JavaFX. So in a nutshell, if I have a class called public class application, okay, and I can have some data members, I can have a constructor, I can have multiple constructors, right? Which means I have some parameters and I can have methods like get methods, set method, and other methods, right? So somewhere there is a class called application. As soon as I say my public class myJavaFX extend application, then it's basically extending everything that I have over here. All right. So once I now create an object of this type like myJavaFX, that object can not only grab anything that you're writing within the JavaFX, but can also access this. So that's the basic concept. Not knowing what all you have in application, only knowing what you have done so far, I can create a basic thing like this. I don't need to know everything about application. I just need to know the kind of methods and kind of constructors that I have, and then I can use them. Okay. Now, in our prior chapters, we only concentrated on creating these things and seeing how what you created are now utilized when you create objects out of it, right? But now we are not creating these things. We are using the keyword extend to get everything from here and then creating what I need for my program. All right. So the inside my start method, okay, I pass this primary stage, okay, and this primary stage, if I go back into this, you see what I have. My background at the very base is my stage. So every time I have to create a stage, on top of this stage I have a scene, and on that scene I would have different kinds of layout which would have different kinds of nodes. Okay, so first I pass that primary state. So in my start method I said stage primary state. So this is what I just created, the stage. Okay, this stage has some properties. Okay, so if I go back, if I come back over here, see how I am now associating that primary stage that I just created with the methods that are there. So there has to be some kind of a method which is written in this primary stage. Now this is application. There is something called stage there as well. Right? So there is stage, and there has to be some kind of a method called set title. Right? So as soon as I create an object called stage, okay, I just need to create that object name. I said primary stage, which is of the type stage, okay, and then I'm going to call in the set title method, and I can also use, probably there is probably a get title method. So remember, Jill, you were asking why is it that we need these things? See, now you're using it. So, and I am not the one who even wrote those things. So the only thing I did was I created an object out of stage, and I called it primary stage. So in my stage class, there's something written over here. I created an object out of stage, and with that stage, I'm calling my set title. All right. There is also another one called set scene. So there must be another one called set scene. There another one called show. So there are other things in my stage that now I'm utilizing. So this is the fun, or this is the I guess the advantage of using, or the magic of using, this object-oriented languages like this. So as soon as I said primary stage set title, and that set title, I bet you would probably take in a string value, and that is why you can pass a string. If it did not take a string, if it said it took an integer, that would give me an error right away. You guys with me? So same thing over here. Primary stage set scene, I can pass an object, right? So now I'm passing an object. Primary stage show is probably a blank, no method showing there. Okay, so these are my three methods that I'm using with my primary stage. Let me go back. Remember our static versus non-static methods? And we said in a non-static method, you do not need to create an object. But in a static method, you have to always create an object too. So that's how our static versus non-static is coming in. We'll this kind of helps you go back and refer to some of those distinctions that we had made. We said if we want something to be shared across the entire object, then I would not define that as something. But if I do want individual ones to be able to use a particular thing, that's where I'm going to use a particular way. So that's how the static versus non-static comes in. Anyways, coming back to this particular example, so this primary stage object can use the set title method, set scene method, and the show method. Now let's come back and take a look at this. What are these two things, button and scene? I'm creating objects called button, and I'm creating an object called scene from this class called scene and this class called button. So there is a class just like our stage that is written out there called button. Okay, so I just said button and the name of my object, and this could be anything. New button and the text that I want to pass in that button. All right. Again, my scene, new scene, and I pass my button and two of my dimension parameters for that scene. Okay. So these two things, the button and the scene, are now being passed in this set scene. And remember, this scene already has the button built into it. So when I pass that scene, the button comes along with it. Guys, understand the GUI concept, how that's happening? So remember, you have the background, stage, then you have a scene, and then you have your button sitting there, which is our node. Okay, so I created a button, then I created a scene object. I took my scene object and passed my button and some parameter. That kind of given me some of the size of that scene. And then with my primary stage, with this set scene method, I basically pass that entire scene through this. So now my scene is going to have my button and is also going to have a size. All right, let's take a moment and make sure we understand this, because this is something that we are going to be seeing being repeated a lot. We're going to add more properties, how to add text, how to add color, how to add image, but the basic concept of a basic stage, a scene, and a button. Yes, Travis? By passing the primary stage, yes.
No, up at the top where it says public void start stage, primary stage.
Right.
Is that initializing primary stage?
Yes. Yes. So I'm saying this is stage, primary stage. All right. Right. I'm saying that I'm going to send something like a stage object and given it some kind of a variable. I could have said stage X. Right. So then X would be the object of stage. So then everything over here is going to be X dot set title, X dot set scene, X dot show. Yes? Everybody good? All right. All right. So what I want to do now is we'll run this program, okay? But let's take a look at another one, which is our multiple stage, okay? So I have, again, a lot of inputs. I have a multiple stage demo. That's my class, which extends application. And then I have my start method. And of course, as you know, as soon as I try to run this multiple stage, it's going to come to the main method. And the main method is going to call this launch method. And the launch is going to call this start method. So this is my public void start stage, primary stage. Very similar, right? Then I have these three things. My primary stage, I want to add a title, I want to add a scene, and I want to show it, right? So now I have a scene that I created, and in that scene I have a new button, OK. So see how it's kind of embedded in there. And in this primary scene, I pass this scene. So this is my primary stage, right? Now I now come in and create another stage. So not only do I have this, but now I want to create another stage. And I do it by simply saying stage, name of the object, new stage. Can I name this thing primary stage? I cannot, right? Because that's going to conflict with the variable name. And then this particular stage that I just created, I'm going to associate a title and also associate a scene. And what is this scene? Scene is new button, new stage, 200, 250. So you kind of see how this is all working. They are basically combining those two steps into one. Remember in the previous one you said button, button equals new button, pass OK, but they do the whole thing in this. So they say get scene, new scene. So not only they are creating a new scene, but within the new scene they are creating a new button and passing all this. Are we having fun? Yes? No? Yes, right? All right. Without going forward, let's go back and run this, okay? So I'm going to minimize this and then come to my, and I'll try it with Java Eclipse first, okay? So if I come in and open my Eclipse, you know what? This one is Neon. Neon is not the new version. You know that, right? The newer version, I should have probably downloaded this. The newer version is Oxygen. Yeah. So what I was trying to show you is when you have your Java Eclipse, you have to go in and download the plugin for JavaFX. In Eclipse, you have to do that, and there are two ways of doing it. This one kind of has already done it because I went through it in the last class. So it allows me to open up JavaFX. On your computers, you might actually see this JavaFX project. Once we added the jar files, it allows me to open up JavaFX. Okay, but if I do it for the first time, it does not let me. So let me show you something that you could do to set up your Eclipse to run JavaFX. And you can do it for both Windows and Mac. Okay, there are several ways of doing it, and I had used the harder way, but I'll show you both ways. You can go to Help and go to Eclipse Marketplace and search for JavaFX. Okay, if you are running the Neon, you do not get that EFX platform over here. But if you are running the newer version of Oxygen, you are going to get something like E within parentheses FX Clips 2.4, and the only thing you need to do is basically install. Three 3.0. Okay. Now one thing I could do is I could go back and download an Oxygen, and if I download that, you will see that. But that will take some time. So what you can do is, if you type in JavaFX, you're going to see EFX. You're going to see this link called EFX, and I think John was telling me it's now 3.0. It's not 2.4, so it is EFX 3.0. Did you see that, Jill? The only thing you got to do is click install. It's going to run through the process, and you say yes, agree, I agree, and then it will restart the process, restart the IDE. Okay. Once you do that, you should be able to see that JavaFX, when you create a project called new, if you select project, you should be able to see this JavaFX. So now the only thing you have to do is come in and create a project called JavaFX. All right. In NetBeans, if you are running NetBeans, that is already built in. You don't have to do anything. All right. You just come in new JavaFX. Okay. The other way of doing it is basically by going in, adding. So I would go file, new, and I would create a Java project. And let's say I say test setup. Does JGrasp has it built in? You know, I don't know. I have not tried JGrasp. You guys need to stay away from JGrasp a little. It might. I'm just kidding. Just go back and try it. So if I do a test setup, next, and I'll say finish. So this is my test setup. So then I can right click on it and go to properties, and I can go to the Java build path. See how the JRE system library is there, which is my 1.8. I can go to add library, use the JRE system library. It gives me my 1.8. I would do finish. Basically, it adds my library to it. And then once I come in over here, I would go to add external jars. And I need to go through my JDK, the JRE, the lib folder, and there is a jar called jrswt.jar. And you basically have to select that, open, and run through the process. Okay. Again, I'm going to go with the easier one. So with a newer version, now those were the ones that we used to do when you had an older version. There's another way where you can go and type in the EFX plugin or give them the real URL address. You could do it, but in the newer Oxygen, I saw that it really makes it a real simple, where if you go to window to help and go to the Eclipse marketplace and just type in JavaFX and search for it, you will see the EFX Eclipse 3.0, and you just click on install, and that would do it for you. All right. So since we have this, so let's go ahead and, oh, actually this is the one, must be open from the last time. So let's run this. So this is what it does. See this? Week 10, how are you today? I am good. So this is actually coming from this program. Now let's say I want to do this thing. So now my stage is a little smaller. Okay. So this is my program right here. So this is basically the one that is the very first one, which is the single stage. Remember? So I have my import. Now if you click on the plus sign, it will show all the other ones. Okay, so don't think there was the other ones was not there. So public class my JavaFX extends application. I have my start method, and then I have my main method, which calls the launch. And as soon as the launch calls, the launch actually calls the start method. So now here's my primary stage. Okay, I created a button, created a scene, just like you did earlier. And this button shows you, how are you today? I am good. You don't need to do that. I can say hello. And this set title, I set it to week 10, but you can change it to anything. Yeah. When you put in the scene on the stage, it basically takes the entire space. So it's hard to see the separation, but you can tell by the title that the title is the one that is associated with the stage. Okay. Now these are also some GUI formats. You see that by default you didn't have to create any of this. You see these things? They're already built into the GUI. And this is what you would actually see when you start seeing the new platform being developed. In the beginning, you probably did not have this, but they have figured out that anytime a person opens up a page, these are kind of there by default. Okay, so they have added these things. So the more mature some of this platform gets, the more features they would add to it. Also, if I do not remember this set scene that we have, it would also take in one argument. Remember how you can have multiple overridden methods? So this new scene, so these are actually constructors, because you're saying scene, new scene, and passing in one. Okay, so there must be a constructor or allows for more than one signature. So if I do a save here, so it basically sets the stage. The scene is basically embedded on this stage, and it is only trying to go with the minimum size. So as you can see, you cannot almost see this. So just to have these three things and whatever the default size is. It doesn't even give you the title, because you see over here, testing my first FX, yeah, goes with a very basic. Now as soon as you make it big, so but you see that this property is not associated with your program. You see this? So even though, now if you come in and add some parameters like the button OK and 300 500 or 500 400, that would be big enough to show the title. But even let's say you do not do it, see these three features over here actually makes it, you can expand this. So even though you do not write in your program, it does let you do that. and of course it's showing you the text. So by running it like this, it only gives you this and also tells you that there's a text to it. So it's basically shortens everything in there. Yes, Travis. This. No, it does not. That's exactly what we were doing. So if I did not put my size of my scene, then it only takes the default size of the stage. And the default size of the stage is this. It only shows these three icons. That's all it shows. So unless you specify, it is not going to give you everything. Even it did not show you the title. Okay? So it does not take the entire space. All right, everybody good? All right. Let's come in and take a look at, now this was my previous stage. It's my multiple stage. Let's try to take this one and run this in NetBeans. Everybody good with the Eclipse part? Again, for those of you guys who have the Oxygen, go ahead and install and try running it there. Okay? So file, new project. See, this is built in with JavaFX, and application. Next. By default, just these things out. This is something that it creates by default. See this? So this part over here, I did not even type anything. I just said I want to create this class called JavaFX application. All right? Let's run the default one. So this is run just by default. So let's take a look at this. Now it actually added a few more things to it. So this is my these are my imports. This is my application that I named JavaFX application, and then I have my start method and I pass my stage, And of course, this would call my main. This is my launch. And look at what it does. With this primary stage, it does three things. It sets my hello world, then it sets my scene and passes my scene. So what's my scene? Here is my scene over here. Okay. Scene, new scene, and they pass this thing called root. And this root is nothing but the layout that they are creating. Remember, I was telling you that you have your stage, you have the scene, and then you have a layout that you can apply, and they applied a layout called stack pane. Okay, there are different other kinds of layout as well. There are vertical, horizontal, different kinds of layout that we'll look into when we go through the chapter. So this root is nothing but some kind of a layout, and the layout in this case is called the stack pane layout. So stack pane is a kind of a layout, and it said root equals new stack pane. So what they did was, once they defined the layout, they utilized this object called root, which is of the type stack pane, and call this method called get children. So there is a method written in the stack pane class, okay, that would allow you, there is a method called get children written in the stack pane. Only thing I did was create an object out of that class and use that dot notation and call this methods, okay. And you can also call this other method called add, and this would allow for an object to be passed, and I passed in button. So where is my button? I created my button right over here. You should see how everything is kind of calling each other. So some of these things, we spent almost 8-9 weeks going through the basics again, the methods, the parameters, created my object, my class, my new statement, my extend statement. This is where I see a lot of these things being implemented or incorporated. So you should have a good understanding of how these things are working. So I'm creating my get children and then calling in my add button, and this button is what I created over here. Now again, two-step process. I said button.setText say hello world. Now again, it shows you, Jill, your question. Remember we said, why do we have to have our set text and get text? I could have used button equals new button and passed my hello world there. That would call me that would go immediately to that constructor, which allows for my string to be passed in and let my object be created. But if I don't want to use it, I can also use this. So that should tell you why do I have those set get. Not that I was using it there, but this allows me to use it like this. So I say button.setText say hello world. All right. Now something that you have not seen but we're going to be seeing a lot is, the previous example that we used, we created a button, but the button really did not have any interaction. It just showed a text, hello or something. If you want that button to be interactive, then you have to add something called action event. So this is another method that you need to add to that object. The button that you created is an inanimate object, right? If you want to add some action to that button, you have to then attach or associate an action event with it. So what is my action event and how do I do that? I said, I want to add a handle, and that handle is going to, handle is a method. So I'm adding a method to my button, and the method name is called handle, and it is going to pass these two things, action event. Let me stop. So we were looking at the code right here, and so what we were talking about earlier was the previous example from the book. The button that you had was not an actionable button, so you could not do anything with that. But in this one, you're actually making it an actionable button. So what you need to do are a few things over here. One is you are adding, first of all, this handle, okay? And in that handle, you're creating an event, and again, event is an object out of a class called action event, okay? And what it does is basically lets you write this system out print line onto the console. So you're actually going to see this thing in this console. But this is not where it ends, because then associated with that button, you have to now add this method called set on action, okay? And this set on action would then call an event handler, and this event handler is the action event that you are bringing in, okay? So first of all, I created this handle called action event, and then in this handle, I basically wrote what I want. And if I want to write another statement over here, then this handle gets associated with that button, and this button, the only way the button gets this activity is when you associate that with this method called set on action, and within that you actually create a new event handler. Now, one thing I want to point out here is when you type these codes, try to use the assist as much as you can. As soon as if you're typing it in, let's say, NetBeans, okay, and as soon as you type in set, you will see that you will have some of the IntelliJ or some of the assist that would pop up. This one is not popping up because it's not in the right place. So somehow not only is it it should give you the assist. That's what I'm looking for. Hold on, Jerry. Yeah, something is, because I'm going with that things, it's probably giving you this. So you will see these assists that would come on, and use those assists as much as you can, because some of these method names are this long. So if I save it now, something is already running. Now, another thing that I want to point out, and we see this thing happen a lot, when you have one of the programs that is running, you would not see this run button, or this run button is kind of disabled. So look to see if you have something running at the back, and you might have to come in and close that to get this button, the run button, disabled. I get a lot of times, sometimes if you have multiple programs and you ran something, you made a little change, and then you're trying to go back and run, and you don't see that at all. So if I come in and do this, and what it does is, this one is now interactive. As you can see, if you take it over here, it kind of shows or glows a little bit. And of course, if I don't click on it, nothing happens because it does not call the action handler. But if I do click on it, then this is the two things that get written, or the two lines that get written onto the console.